Richard Godfrey has little doubt, is so sure about the final location of the Boeing 777.
It will only take one more search and we will find it.
It slipped away without a crash, without a call, and without a trace, leaving behind only questions in the dark. MH370 wasn't just lost. It was removed, layer by layer, from the systems meant to keep it visible. But somewhere in orbit, a military satellite saw something no one could explain. And before that silent flash, there was a moment even more deliberate. The plane that erased itself. At 12:41 a.m. on March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 lifted off from Kuala Lumpur, bound for Beijing. For the first 40 minutes, everything unfolded like clockwork. The Boeing 777 climbed to cruising altitude, exchanged routine calls with air traffic control, and passed over the South China Sea without any sign of trouble. Then, as the aircraft approached the edge of Malaysian airspace, it responded to what would be its final transmission, "Goodnight, Malaysian 370, and vanished. What happened next wasn't an accident. One by one, the systems designed to keep MH370 visible were turned off. The transponder stopped broadcasting. A DSB signals disappeared from civilian tracking. And with no emergency call, no squawk code, and no distress tone in the captain's voice, the silence was chilling in its precision. It didn't suggest panic, it suggested planning. This wasn't a random electrical failure or catastrophic event. Modern airliners are built with layered redundancies. Failures come with noise, alerts, and chaos. What MH370 did instead was clean, calculated, and timed with surgical intent. It vanished at a handoff point between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, an administrative gray zone where radar coverage thins and responsibility lags by precious minutes. Whoever made it disappear didn't just understand the aircraft, they understood how to vanish it. The signal that refused to die. For hours after MH370 went dark, the world assumed the plane was gone. But somewhere above the Indian Ocean, a satellite kept listening. It wasn't a tracking system. It wasn't looking for airplanes. It was part of the Inmarsat network, a constellation designed for timekeeping and global communications. And yet, at 2:25 a.m., long after the last radar contact, it received a handshake from the missing jet. This wasn't the signal of a plane in distress. It was a background whisper, an automated ping from the aircraft's satellite data unit, or SDU. Even more unnerving, the signal didn't just resume, it rebooted. That means the SDU lost power, then came back online, as if someone flipped a switch. And this wasn't cockpit-level behavior. According to Boeing 777 pilots, resetting that unit requires specific knowledge of the aircraft's internal systems, knowledge that typically lives in maintenance manuals, not pilot checklists. These handshakes didn't contain GPS coordinates or headings. They recorded timing offsets, data that allowed investigators to estimate the plane's distance from the satellite. But instead of narrowing the search, the pings opened a new chapter of mystery. Why, after a deliberate blackout, would someone allow a signal to return? Was it an oversight or a fingerprint left behind on purpose? The southern search that found nothing. Once analysts realized the handshakes were still coming, they used the timing data to draw arcs, broad rings of possible locations where the plane could have been during each ping. Over time, these arcs formed a corridor stretching in two directions. One led north into the highlands of Central Asia. The other plunged south, deep into the Indian Ocean. The southern route seemed more plausible, not because the evidence was stronger, but because the ending was cleaner, a plane out of fuel, descending into endless water. Governments poured hundreds of millions of dollars into that hypothesis. Search teams from Australia, Malaysia, and China deployed deep-sea sonar, autonomous underwater vehicles, and side-scan imaging tools. They swept tens of thousands of square miles across a featureless seabed, an environment that should have made wreckage easy to spot. Yet scan after scan came back empty. No fuselage, no engines, no flight recorders. The sheer scale of the failure became its own form of evidence. A Boeing 777 doesn't vanish gently. Even in disintegration, its components, landing gear, wing spars, turbines, leave scars on the seafloor. Other disasters, like Air France 447, left visible debris in black boxes despite occurring in deeper waters. But with MH370, the silence hardened. With every fruitless pass, confidence in the southern path began to fracture. The data had pointed here, but the ocean said no. The northern corridor and radar blindness. The northern arc was always the less comfortable option, not because it was impossible, but because it required us to believe a plane crossed multiple borders without being noticed. Yet, in aviation, invisibility doesn't always require stealth. Sometimes it only needs timing and knowledge of blind spots. After turning west over the Malacca Strait, MH370 could have followed a corridor that threaded between inactive radars and under-defended airspace. Regions like the Andaman Sea, remote parts of India, and the high-altitude deserts of western China contain stretches where radar coverage is sparse, intermittent, or simply turned off overnight to conserve resources. These aren't science fiction gaps, they're budgetary and bureaucratic realities. And here's where the story deepens. Beneath the passenger deck of a Boeing 777 is the avionics bay, accessible mid-flight through a small floor hatch. It's a dense, wire-laced space where critical systems converge. Someone with access to this compartment could influence data flows without relying on cockpit controls, redirecting how the plane communicated or didn't. This possibility reframes the vanishing not as a cockpit decision, but as something more elaborate. The rebooted satellite data unit, the timing of the blackout, and the route through radar shadows all begin to look less like a coincidence and more like choreography. If MH370 flew north, it wasn't lost. It was guided through the seams of the global surveillance net. The satellite that may have seen it. 4 years after MH370 disappeared, a quiet detail surfaced in defense circles, one that had never been part of the public investigation. In 2018, reports emerged that a United States classified satellite known as USA-229 may have detected an infrared flash over the southern Indian Ocean at nearly the same moment MH370's final handshake occurred. The signal wasn't conclusive. It wasn't an image, a coordinate, or a trail, but it was something, a faint heat bloom, possibly consistent with an aircraft impact. Infrared detection is not designed for aircraft tracking. These satellites scan the globe for missile launches, nuclear events, and thermal anomalies from orbit. They are accurate enough to distinguish a rocket plume in darkness, but their data is classified and rarely shared, which is why, when intelligence experts hinted at the detection, it raised more questions than answers. Why hadn't this data been acknowledged during the largest aviation search in history? Was it too vague to be useful, or too sensitive to be disclosed? If the detection was real, it would mean someone saw something. Not speculation, not drift modeling, but an actual signal in the moment. The fact that it was never integrated into official reports feeds a darker idea. That somewhere, behind locked doors, more of this story is known than admitted. And the silence around that signal now echoes louder than the signal itself. What the silence reveals. In a world saturated with surveillance, it's easy to believe that nothing truly disappears. Yet, MH370 challenges that assumption at every turn. This wasn't a case of failing technology. It was a demonstration of how silence itself can be engineered. Every unanswered question reveals not just what we don't know, but how easily systems built for visibility can be subverted by knowledge and timing. The mystery has outlived public attention, official reports, and even the search teams that once scoured the ocean floor. But its implications linger. If a commercial airliner can vanish between handoffs, beneath budget cuts, and within classified radar gaps, what does that say about the infrastructure we rely on to feel safe in the sky? And what does it suggest about the threshold for truth in a world where access to data, and the choice to share it, can change the course of history? Sometimes, the deeper mystery isn't what we failed to find. It's what we never looked for, and why. It was never just a disappearance. It was a test of how well the world listens when something wants to be quiet. And in that quiet, MH370 left behind a new kind of map. Not of locations, but of blind spots, where knowledge meets denial and silence becomes strategy. If this story moved you, share it, subscribe for more untold investigations, and let us know what theory still keeps you awake.